In March 2019, a 10-year-old boy named Ethan Matthews from Chapel Hill, North Carolina, sat watching television with his father when a martial arts film came on screen. The moment Brandon Lee appeared, Ethan went rigid. His father, David, noticed tears streaming down his son's face. Ethan turned to him with an expression David would later describe as ancient. "Dad, that's me. I remember what happened. I remember the gun." David felt the room tilt. His son had never shown particular interest in Brandon Lee or martial arts films. What began in that moment would lead to one of the most thoroughly documented cases of past life regression involving a Hollywood tragedy. Over the following days, Ethan became increasingly distressed. He couldn't sleep. He kept describing fragments of memory, the feel of a leather coat, the smell of gunpowder, a sudden burning sensation in his abdomen. Jennifer Matthews, Ethan's mother and a clinical psychologist, initially attributed this to an overactive imagination triggered by the film. But when Ethan began providing specific details about the set of The Crow that weren't common knowledge, she contacted Dr. Rebecca Hoffman, a researcher at the University of Virginia's Division of Perceptual Studies who specialized in cases of children reporting past life memories. Dr. Hoffman arrived at the Matthews home 3 weeks after Ethan's initial reaction. She found a boy who seemed older than his years when discussing certain topics, yet remained thoroughly a child in other ways. He played video games, complained about homework, and loved soccer. But when the conversation turned to Brandon Lee, something shifted in his demeanor. His vocabulary changed. His posture straightened. It was as if another layer of consciousness emerged. During their first recorded session, Dr. Hoffman asked Ethan to describe his earliest memory related to Brandon Lee. Ethan closed his eyes. "I remember being in Hong Kong. Not as a kid, as an adult. I remember the humidity, how it felt like breathing through wet fabric. I remember training. My body knew movements without my mind having to think about them. There was this teacher, an old man with calloused hands. He would correct my stances, push my elbow a fraction of an inch, and suddenly everything would feel right." Dr. Hoffman took notes carefully. Ethan was describing what sounded like Brandon Lee's martial arts training in Hong Kong, something documented in interviews Lee had given but not widely publicized in mainstream media that a 10-year-old would typically encounter. Jennifer sat in on these sessions, watching her son with a mixture of concern and fascination. "The way he moves his hands when he talks about martial arts," she told Dr. Hoffman privately. "I've never seen him move that way before. It's fluid, precise. Ethan's always been a bit clumsy, honestly. But when he demonstrates these positions, it's like watching someone who's trained for years." Over subsequent weeks, Dr. Hoffman conducted what she called verification protocols, structured tests designed to distinguish between information Ethan could have accessed through normal means and knowledge that seemed inexplicable. She showed him photographs of various film sets, mixing actual locations from The Crow with similar-looking industrial spaces. Ethan consistently identified the correct locations. When shown photographs of various crew members mixed with similar-looking individuals from other film productions of that era, Ethan pointed to specific people. "That's Alex. He was the cinematographer. And that's Jeff. He wore those weird glasses. I remember joking with him about them." Dr. Hoffman verified these identifications. The individuals were indeed Alex Proyas, the director, and Jeff Most, one of the producers. These weren't faces that appeared in typical media coverage about Brandon Lee or The Crow. They weren't famous figures a child would recognize. Yet Ethan identified them with casual familiarity. But it was when Ethan began describing the final day of filming that Dr. Hoffman knew this case required deeper investigation. One afternoon in April, Ethan sat in the Matthews' living room as rain drummed against the windows. Dr. Hoffman had her recording equipment set up. She asked Ethan if he remembered the day of the accident. Ethan's face changed. The color drained from his cheeks. He looked younger suddenly, more vulnerable. "I don't like talking about this," he said quietly. Jennifer moved closer to him on the couch, taking his hand. Dr. Hoffman assured him he could stop at any time. Ethan took a deep breath. It was supposed to be a simple scene. "I was tired. We've been shooting for hours. There was this feeling in the air, like heaviness. I remember Michael Massey. He looked nervous. He was a good guy, gentle. I remember thinking he seemed uncomfortable with the gun. Dr. Hoffman interjected gently. How did you know Michael Massey's name? Ethan looked at her, as if the question was strange. That was his name. The actor playing Fun Boy. He had kind eyes. This detail sent Dr. Hoffman back to her research. Michael Massey was indeed the actor who had fired the fatal shot, but his name wasn't typically mentioned in general coverage of Brandon Lee's death. Most articles focused on Lee himself, not the actor who had been holding the weapon. Ethan continued, his voice growing softer. The scene was me entering the apartment. Michael's character was supposed to shoot me as I came through the door. We'd rehearsed it. Everything was supposed to be safe. I remember the moment before, standing outside that door, getting into character. There was this apartment building set, all gritty and dark. I could smell something metallic, like old pipes or something. And then I heard action through the door. He paused, his breathing quickening. Jennifer squeezed his hand. I pushed the door open. I was carrying a bag. I remember the weight of it. And then I saw the flash. It was brighter than I expected. And this impact, like someone punched me in the stomach, but burning. I remember stumbling backward. And this thought went through my mind. Something's wrong. That wasn't right. But I thought maybe I was just reacting to the blank. I thought I was supposed to sell it, make it look real. Dr. Hoffman felt chills run down her spine. This matched the documented sequence of events. Brandon Lee had been shot as he entered through a doorway, carrying a bag of groceries. The tragic error, a bullet fragment lodged in the gun barrel from a previous scene, combining with a blank round to create a lethal projectile, had indeed occurred in that exact moment. What happened next? Dr. Hoffman asked gently. Ethan's eyes were distant now, seeing something no one else in the room could see. I walked backward. I was supposed to react to show I'd been hit, so I did. But the pain was real. It kept getting worse. And then I was on the ground. I could hear people shouting, but their voices seemed far away. Someone was kneeling next to me. I think it was a crew member. I remember seeing the ceiling lights. They were so bright. And I kept thinking about Eliza. I needed to tell her something, but I couldn't remember what. And then it hurt to breathe. Each breath was like fire in my chest. Tears were streaming down Ethan's face now. Jennifer was crying too, holding her son. Dr. Hoffman stopped the recording. The session had provided extraordinary detail, but the emotional toll was evident. After Ethan had calmed down and left the room to play in the backyard, his way of grounding himself back in his current life, Dr. Hoffman spoke with Jennifer and David. The level of detail he's providing matches the documented accounts, Dr. Hoffman said. But more than that, he's describing sensory experiences and emotional states that weren't in any published reports. The smell of the set, the weight of the grocery bag, the specific thought pattern about Eliza Hutton, Brandon's fiancée. These are the kinds of intimate details that only someone who lived through that experience would know. David, who had remained skeptical throughout the process, shook his head. But how? How could Ethan know these things? We've never discussed Brandon Lee in our house. We don't watch martial arts films. Hell, I barely remember The Crow coming out. I was in college. Dr. Hoffman nodded. That's what makes this case so compelling. We've ruled out normal acquisition of information. I've checked your internet history with your permission, examined Ethan's school environment, spoken with his teachers. There's no evidence source for this knowledge, and yet he has it in intimate detail. Over the following months, Dr. Hoffman brought in additional researchers. Dr. James Mitchell, a forensic psychologist, conducted his own interviews with Ethan, attempting to catch inconsistencies or signs of coaching. He found none. Dr. Sarah Patel, a specialist in childhood psychology, evaluated Ethan for various conditions that might explain confabulation or false memory creation. Her assessment concluded that Ethan was psychologically healthy with no indicators of dissociative disorders or tendency toward fantasy. One of the most striking sessions occurred in June when Dr. Hoffman brought photographs of Brandon Lee's personal effects, items that had never been publicly displayed or photographed for media. These came from a private collector who had acquired them through estate sales and was willing to participate in the research. Among the items was a watch, a leather jacket, and a notebook containing handwritten notes. Dr. Hoffman showed Ethan the photographs without identifying what they were. Ethan immediately pointed to the watch. I wore that. It was a gift from my father. It ran fast. I always had to adjust it. Dr. Hoffman felt her pulse quicken. She contacted Bruce Lee's estate through her research network. After extensive discussion about the ethical implications and privacy concerns, a representative confirmed that Bruce Lee had indeed given Brandon that specific watch, and that Brandon had complained in private conversations about it running fast. When shown the notebook, Ethan studied the handwriting. That's my writing. Those are notes about the character, about Eric Draven. I was trying to understand his pain, what it would feel like to come back from death. The notebook had never been publicly displayed. Its contents, character notes for The Crow, matched exactly what Ethan described. But perhaps the most evidential moment came when Dr. Hoffman arranged something unprecedented. Through careful networking and extensive ethical review, she managed to set up a phone conversation between Ethan and Jeff Most, one of the producers of The Crow, who had been on set the day of the accident. Most, now in his 60s and living in California, had agreed to speak with Ethan without being told beforehand about the boy's claims. The conversation occurred in July, with Dr. Hoffman and the Matthews family present. Ethan spoke to Most naturally, asking him how he'd been, whether he still wore those distinctive glasses. Most, audibly startled, confirmed he had worn unique prescription glasses during the production. Ethan then said something that made everyone in the room freeze. Jeff, I wanted to say I'm sorry. I know what happened affected you. It wasn't your fault. None of you could have known. Most's voice on the phone broke. There was a long silence. Finally, he said, Brandon, whoever you are, we've carried that guilt for 26 years. Every single person on that set. We've all wondered if there was something we could have seen, should have checked. Ethan responded with a maturity that seemed impossible for a 10-year-old. There was nothing. It was a freak accident. I don't remember being angry. I remember just being sad that I wouldn't get to finish the film. And sad for Eliza. Please, if you can, tell her I wasn't in pain at the end. Everything just got quiet. After the call ended, Dr. Hoffman sat in silence with the Matthews family. David was no longer skeptical. Jennifer was holding Ethan, who had returned to being a tired 10-year-old boy ready for dinner and video games. What does this mean? David asked. If this is real, if Ethan really is somehow connected to Brandon Lee's consciousness, what are we supposed to do with that? Dr. Hoffman didn't have easy answers. Cases like this challenge our fundamental understanding of consciousness, she said. We have strong evidence that consciousness survives physical death in some form, that memories can carry across lives. But we're still in the early stages of understanding the mechanism. What I can tell you is that Ethan seems to have integrated these memories in a healthy way. He's not obsessed. He's not losing his own identity. He's simply carrying information from another life. As Ethan approached his 11th birthday, Dr. Hoffman noticed something documented in other cases of past life memory in children. The memories began to fade. Ethan could still recall major events when prompted, but the vivid sensory details started becoming less immediate. It's like they're becoming more like things I learned about rather than things I lived, Ethan explained. Like they're moving further away. Dr. Hoffman published her findings in the Journal of Consciousness Studies, carefully anonymizing Ethan's identity while presenting the wealth of verifiable details he had provided. The paper sparked intense debate in the scientific community. Skeptics argued for alternative explanations, unconscious information acquisition, extraordinary coincidence, even fraud despite the extensive verification protocols. Supporters pointed to the case as among the most thoroughly documented instances of past life memory, particularly involving a celebrity whose death was well documented and whose life details could be verified. For the Matthews family, life eventually returned to a new normal. Ethan remained interested in martial arts, taking up training in his current life with a naturalness that his instructors found remarkable. He spoke occasionally about Brandon Lee, but more often focused on his own life, his own dreams, his own future. Jennifer noted that he carried a certain thoughtfulness about mortality, an unusual wisdom about the fragility of life that seemed to make him kinder, more present with people he loved. On what would have been Brandon Lee's 56th birthday in February 2021, Ethan asked if they could visit Brandon's grave in Seattle. The Matthews family made the trip. Standing before the headstone, Ethan placed flowers, white chrysanthemums, which Dr. Hoffman later verified had been among Brandon Lee's favorite flowers, a detail never widely published. Ethan stood quietly for several minutes. When David asked him what he was thinking, Ethan simply said, "I'm saying goodbye to that life. I'm ready to just be Ethan now." Dr. Hoffman continued following Ethan's case into 2022, documenting the gradual fading of the intense memories while noting that certain knowledge remained. Martial arts techniques executed with precision, an intuitive understanding of film production, and specific emotional connections to people from Brandon Lee's life. In her final report, she wrote, "This case presents compelling evidence for consciousness continuity across physical death. While we cannot definitively prove reincarnation, the specificity and verifiability of the subject's memories, combined with the absence of normal explanatory mechanisms, suggests something profound about the nature of consciousness that mainstream science has yet to fully acknowledge." The case attracted attention from the Brandon Lee estate. After careful consideration and private conversations with the Matthews family, representatives acknowledged the unusual nature of Ethan's knowledge while maintaining appropriate caution about making definitive claims. Eliza Hutton, Brandon Lee's fiancée at the time of his death, declined to meet with Ethan but sent a private message through Dr. Hoffman expressing that if there was any possibility of connection across death, she was grateful for the message of peace Ethan had conveyed. For researchers in the field of consciousness studies, the Ethan Matthews case joined a small but growing collection of well-documented instances where children displayed knowledge of deceased individuals' lives that defied conventional explanation. Dr. Hoffman noted that what made Ethan's case particularly strong was the specificity of the trauma memory, the final scene, the accident, the physical sensations, and emotional states. Trauma memories tend to be deeply encoded. She explained in interviews about the case. If consciousness does survive death and can reemerge in new lives, traumatic death experiences might be among the most likely to carry forward, precisely because of their intensity and the way they're neurologically encoded. As of 2023, Ethan was 14 years old, a typical teenager navigating high school, friendships, and his own identity. The memories of being Brandon Lee had largely faded to the background of his consciousness, present but no longer immediate. He occasionally watched The Crow, feeling a complex mixture of familiarity and distance. In interviews with Dr. Hoffman conducted for her ongoing research, Ethan reflected on the experience. "I used to think it was weird, scary even. But now I think maybe it's just part of how life works, how we continue. I'm grateful I got to live again. And I'm grateful I knew Brandon's life, even if it ended too soon. It makes me want to make sure I live this life fully, not waste it." The case remains open in Dr. Hoffman's files, a testament to the enduring mystery of consciousness. Whether Ethan Matthews truly carried forward the consciousness of Brandon Lee, or whether some other explanation will eventually emerge, the case stands as a reminder that we have much to learn about the nature of memory, identity, and the continuity of awareness. In a universe where consciousness can emerge from matter, perhaps it should not surprise us if it can also transcend the boundaries we assume confine it. If you found this investigation compelling and want to explore more documented cases of past life memories, consciousness continuity, and the mysteries that challenge our understanding of life and death, please subscribe to our channel. We're committed to bringing you carefully researched stories that take these extraordinary claims seriously while maintaining rigorous investigative standards. Join our community of curious minds exploring the frontiers of human consciousness, and you'll be notified whenever we publish new investigations into these profound mysteries. Click subscribe now and help us continue bringing these remarkable stories to light.